Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for March. Don't know why I'm singing. No idea at all, But today it's kind of like it's been quite a busy month so far. It's been fun. I've been doing lots of things. I've been learning lots of things. I've been looking into the past. I've been looking into the future. I've been looking back at the history. Been seeing what I'm going to be planning for the rest of the year, and I want to broaden my horizons. I want to expand my mind. I want to get some education into my life, and to do that I thought I really should get somebody who knows an awful lot about education, is an educator, has educated, and has also been involved in board games as well. So joining me, I have got Dr. Scout Blum. So, hello, Scout. Thank you very much for coming on.
Hello. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted because this, as always, and this is my perennial excuse now, has been a long time in the making. But so here we go. The reason that we're kind of on the show was I put a call out a little while ago, and I was looking to just expand my horizons, expand my knowledge, and just speak to some people who weren't necessarily kind of developers or designers in the field, but are maybe kind of getting involved in using kind of board games and various different things. But you're currently, you're professor at the moment. At the moment, you're always a professor. Do you ever lose a professor? Can you lose your professorship?
I think you can not be a professor if you decided not to be, but I am currently a professor. I'm actually a professor of history at Troy University in Alabama.
Right, okay. Is this what you've been doing like all of your professional life? Have you just basically got through education and then just continued until you became like an educator?
More or less. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Texas, and then for a while I worked in a law firm. Mm-hmm. My husband was going to law school, but then I went back to school, and so since then, really this is, I got my PhD, and I got a job right out of grad school, and here I am.
What made you, going back, what made you kind of, because you specialise in history?
Yes.
Am I correct? But what kind of first drove you into kind of like the history books looking back in the past? Was there anything in particular that kind of really kind of grabbed your interest, grabbed your fascination with that topic?
I think I had some amazing teachers when I was in high school and college. I had a teacher, Mrs. Nelson, in high school who just really brought American history to life for me. And then I had a professor in college whose name was Clarence Lasby, who would tell us these stories. He was a really great storyteller, and he had actually interviewed President Truman when President Truman was alive. Mm-hmm. And, that to me was just so exciting, to be able to sort of interact with some of these, real historical figures, whether it's on paper or, actually getting to speak to them. Mm-hmm. So I think part of my interest in history came out of just having some really good teachers, but I also to me, history is very cool because it can be very interdisciplinary. You can do the history of anything, mm-hmm. So it's a field that can be very wide open and very flexible as to what your interests are and what kinds of things you want to do. So I guess that's why it was. I guess that's why it was kind of attractive to me.
Well, I think if you start off in any subject, I mean, even if it's like, say, chemistry or physics, the first thing that you do is like, let's go back to the beginning of things when they first kind of worked on, chemistry, physics and stuff like that. So finding out the kind of the real, what happened at the very beginning of that chosen subject is generally the thing before you kind of move on to kind of
I think you're right.
What's kind of happening just now.
Right, yeah.
Did you then mix into kind of like social history as well? Was there a particular kind of part of history that you really kind of embraced, that you kind of really wanted to get your hooks into, kind of as you were going through your educational career?
My specialties are environmental history. So I study man's interaction with the world, basically. My current research is on kids and the environmental movement. Their activism in the movement and like sort of the roots of the modern climate change activism. Mm-hmm. So that's my main research area, but I also do gender history, femininity and masculinity, and I do African American history as well, mostly 20th century stuff. So I've specialized in those areas.
There's the kind of the thing what they would call the woke culture at the moment, where people are talking about kind of gender identities and things like that. Has that always been something? And it's something that it is something that fascinates me, because I am a white straight guy.
Right.
So I've just been drifting through, going, "Hey, white and straight here," just drifting through. Not have to worry about very much. Oh no, I stubbed my toe. Ouch, kind of thing. I never really. But in your experience, in terms of like the the studies that you've done, has it always, as kind of like gender identity and things like that, always been something that's kind of been there, and it's just something that we're kind of waking up and realizing, oh, this is kind of a thing that we're kind of just more
absolutely
out in the open of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It has definitely, gender is a really interesting topic because it varies by culture, but it also varies by time. The example I always give to my kids is, if you were in Scotland and saw a man wearing a kilt, that wouldn't be weird. But if you saw a man wander into a classroom with a prom dress on, that would be unusual. But so not only is it a cultural thing as to what's masculine and what's feminine, but it does definitely vary by time. What is masculine now has not always been considered so. That the definitions of masculinity and femininity have changed quite a bit over time, but it's always been present, and it's always been something that people have looked at and thought about and written about and worried over. There are certain periods in time where there were kind of crises in, particularly in masculinity. As women gain rights in certain periods, you often see sort of a blowback with men kind of trying to reassess or redefine what is masculine to kind of, refigure out where they are. But yeah, absolutely. It has always been a thing. It's just been, I think we're talking about it. We're more aware of it now. We're more aware of, hoping to reach goals of equality. Obviously than they were in the past. Yeah.
I mean, do you think that maybe we're talking about it more because people have got a platform to discuss it further? That kind of places like social media has allowed, well, look at it this way, like 20, 30 years ago, if somebody says, well, actually, I know I'm kind of male, but I kind of identify more in a kind of a female kind of situation, that society kind of pressures would say, well, don't be silly, Dave, just, you'd go down the pub, there would be nobody they could talk to and talk about their feelings or talk about how they were feeling. Whereas nowadays, if they go on the internet, there's likely to be forums, groups, places where somebody can kind of identify with other people who are going through the same thing. And do you think maybe that there's people have the ability to identify with other people that are going through the same thing, that allows them to kind of group together and have a bit more of a voice kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a big part of what's going on, that people are now seeing, that they're not alone in what they're feeling with sexuality or different kind of gender ideas, that and social media is a good thing, that it helps people find some of those communities. Of course, it's also a really negative thing in that there is some really ugly stuff going on where you get, a lot of kind of nastiness as well. Mm-hmm. But I think part of what's driving it as well is that we have this long history of these social movements that has started, since the 60s and the 70s, and started to sort of bring some of these things out in the public and into politics and into, making laws for equality, and here in the United States, different kinds of things in particular going on. So I think it was first kind of the groundwork was laid by these social movements to bring these issues up and to start the process of legal changes and political changes. But you're right that social media has made it so that people can find their communities and realize that they're not alone a lot easier. It's interesting because in the 1950s, a lot of women were kind of, cordoned off in their houses and were told to be good housewives and moms. Yeah. And some of them had college degrees, and were incredibly bright and were really dissatisfied with that. It wasn't that they didn't love their families or their kids, but it was that they wanted more out of their lives. But they felt really, really isolated because they couldn't talk about it and they didn't feel that they could say something. They didn't know other people were feeling this way. And it took some pretty prominent books coming out, Betty Friedan, all different kinds of authors. But it took, some of those social movements gaining a bit of speed before they realized they were not alone. And I think social media is really good. Like you pointed out, it's sort of heightening that and bringing those groups out to the forefront. So, yeah.
Did you, when you're doing your research, when you're doing like your gender studies research, did you go quite far back in history then? Or did you stick to like the previous kind of maybe 50, 60 years?
My research is 20th century mostly. I go a little bit back into like the late 1800s. But when we study in school, we go back. I'm an Americanist, so I do American history. So I'm kind of fortunate in that I only have to go back 400 years.
Yeah. Whereas in Scotland, we can go back, we've been around for exactly. Ever,
Exactly. Or China. Thank goodness I'm not doing China. So, we, in school, we start, back at the beginning of American history and come forward. I tend to specialize more in like the late 1800s forward. But I still have a fairly good background. I teach that class, so I have a pretty good background in, the gender of the whole American period. A little bit in Europe, but not a whole lot.
Do you end up surprising like your students when you're telling them of kind of like how life was? Is it? Because the vision. The kind of the impression that you get is that there was never any kind of gender fluidity kind of before the kind of the 1960s. Are you kind of? I don't know. We're not talking about board games, but guys, it's time to be educated. But before, well, it's an interesting topic. Would you want to sit and talk about board games forever? Come on. And but do you surprise kind of like your class when you're teaching them and saying, well, actually there was like certain kind of expected gender norms were kind of like they were, there was more exploration in this part, and folk are going, what, that was happening back in this kind of year? Do you kind of find that there's topics that people are kind of surprised about when you're kind of bringing them up in class and things like that?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's kind of weird what they find sort of surprising. We were talking about prostitution at one point, and I have them read a book that has to do with, prostitutes' lives in the early 1800s in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And this one kid was just blown away that there were prostitutes in New York in the 1800s. He thought that that was like a modern phenomenon, which was a little bizarre. But, and certainly like when you talk to them about how, like women and men in the late 1800s used to have very close relationships. They were a lot more sort of cordoned off. So the men would spend time with the men,
Mm-hmm.
women would spend time with women. They weren't really doing a lot of things together, especially like upper class white people.
Yeah.
And so those relationships were very, very close. And while we might not want to characterize them as homosexual, some of the letters back and forth between men or back and forth between women friends,
Mm-hmm.
they might have kind of that air to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think kids are, I think that they're kind of surprised about how different sexuality could be or how different masculinity could be.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of 18-year-olds think that what they know is the only thing in the known universe anyway. So it's neat to open their eyes to things, I guess,
They
sometimes.
just come in and say, prepare to be schooled. And they're just like, going, what? It's like, today we're doing we're doing prostitutes in the 1800s. We're doing
Yes.
what?
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
Now we're doing these two letters, which is, they're quite romantic. Yes, they're between two guys and two women. What do you think of that? What?
No, that is exactly the reaction. Yes.
Then does it then, when you're sitting with kind of all this knowledge, when you see kind of like, I guess, the media at the time and how it was portraying stories, and you're kind of going, that's not how it kind of happened. Do you find that history itself is quite frustrating, because it seems that what was actual history is sometimes kind of not, I'm not using the word whitewashed, but it's kind of sanitized an awful lot to kind of move away when you find out, well, actually everybody just did what they wanted to do, and it was never a big thing until kind of quite recently. Then it became a really kind of big thing, kind of thing.
Well, I think the backlash for some things was pretty bad. Before now, in the 50s, there was a huge backlash against, gays. But sometimes that can be very aggravating, and that tends to be why historians often do not go watch history movies. So that's too much like work, maybe. I don't know.
Do you ever, you're not thought like writing a letter to Steven Spielberg with his report and just saying, see me after class?
World War II movies can be some of the worst. World War II movies have a tendency to be all about the hero and about the glorious sort of escapades of soldiers and heroism. And, sometimes that's not exactly what war is like. And but
do you think it's kind of trying to address it when you see like new films coming out like 1917, which seems to be a lot more kind of lifelike? And even like I saw Dunkirk quite recently, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this is actual hell on earth kind of thing.
Yes, yeah. I think that there are some really amazing war movies that are trying to make a better sort of picture of the horrors of war and the difficulties of war, and that and I think Vietnam had a lot to do with that, in that we got the idea that all of these soldiers came back so traumatized, and it was difficult for people to understand that all soldiers had always come back traumatized. It was just that it was this war that was bringing it out, and so I think that allowed some of these World War II movies to start showing a different kind of side of the war. Yeah, absolutely.
With regards, when you're teaching the history, one of the things I've read in your bio is that you use board games to kind of teach history. Is the board game thing, is that something, have you been playing board games forever, and then you thought, well, I really like playing board games, so if I could bring my board games into work and turn that into coursework, I could basically be playing board games and getting paid for it?
Not exactly, kind of, sort of. Um,
I'm just
I
messing with you.
was I was teaching. I played board games as a kid, and I
Mhm.
loved them. And
Yeah.
but didn't really, when I was younger. I After I had been teaching about 4 or 5 years, I guess, I was getting kind of frustrated because it seemed like the students weren't engaging really well, and they were getting bored with just the same lectures, and I was getting bored giving the same lectures over and over again. So one of my friends told me about a role playing pedagogy, a role playing sort of these a group that was developing these games for history games for the classroom called Reacting to the Past.
Mhm.
And so I started getting into that. And basically, what Reacting to the Past does is they're role playing games, but they're based in real history, and they have real historical characters or the people you're playing, and you are reading real historical documents. And it's very, very cool. Anyway, so we started doing that, and I started getting so excited about games in the classroom because the kids were, really into it, and they were really excited about doing these role playing games. At least most of them were. And some of my friends in Reacting were also very much into board games. And so I had
Yeah.
no idea. And this was probably about, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. But I had no idea what modern board games were like. I had no experience with them, with Catan or, anything. So I was just fascinated by how board games had changed and how sophisticated they had become and what they were dealing with. And, some of my friends were saying, that there were a lot of these history games out there. So I started what has become a massive collection of buying history
Always
games.
the excuses.
I know, I
Nobody's just
know.
like, I'm going to just have 3 or 4, and then
Yeah,
I'm
you
going to
can't.
stop. And
You
it's like,
can't.
you're now on
It
your
doesn't.
fourth
It
shelf.
it doesn't work that way. It just, they're like it's a addiction or something. Anyway, but I started finding out about these modern board games and
Mm.
finding out about some ones that were on topics that I taught on quite a bit, and were very accessible. So that's kind of how I got into it, and then started playing them as well. But and learning that when kids are designing games in the classroom, that is just such an amazing teaching tool, to help get them thinking in different ways, and to
Yeah.
help get them, talking about different kinds of issues.
Yeah.
It was just such an amazing experience that I wanted to continue, and I've gotten deeper and deeper into it, and can't get out. And no, I'm just lost in board games.
How many games have you got?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
My
that's
son counted
ridiculous.
them once. I don't know. I'm probably approaching 100 now, maybe
100.
75 to 100.
No, you see, 70. It's probably 125.
Maybe
It's
more. I
probably.
don't know.
It's because everybody rounds down, and it's amazing how far they round down. I probably got about 250 board games. It's like, no, they've got 500. You can guarantee. Is there is there a particular style that you go for? I mean, do you, because you're using them? I take it you're using them, potentially introducing concepts and kind of almost like teaching tools in the classroom. Are you quite open to the types of games that you'll buy then? I mean, is that, or do you just go like, no, I just wanted them all. Give me
Um,
all the board games.
I like just all of them. I think in class, what I try to do is to show them a big variety of different kinds of games,
Mm-hmm.
consciously to kind of pick a lot of different games so that they can get an idea of what different games are like. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll play things like Axis and Allies. We'll play Settlers of Catan. We'll play Pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of those kinds of games. If for the classroom, for me in particular, I mean, I really like cooperative games. Those are my favorites. I think I've been really, really influenced by Matt Leacock and Pandemic. I think that his games are just amazing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I like cooperative games. I like worker placement games personally. But in the classroom, I try to do a whole bunch of different kinds so that they can get a wide spread of what's out there, I guess.
So when it gets to the end of the term and you get the traditional let's buy our teacher or tutor a present, do you drop subtle hints about the kind of the latest board game that you would like? Do you like put it up on the overhead projector and say, now remember, if you are considering any gifts for me at the end of term, then here's the Board Game Geek link that you can use to my wish list, and just remember there will be a test at the end of the week. And
about what my wishes are.
About what your wish list is, and what's kind of ranked. I think that would be. I think that blackmail is. I know it's a dirty word, but it's also, it's lucrative, depending on which way you're using it.
Is that something that's common in Scotland and England, that you give a present to your professor? My students don't do that. Maybe they just don't like me at all.
You're joking me, really? Is that not a thing?
No.
See, this needs to change into a campaign thing. I mean, this needs to be a thing.
No, I agree.
You have to say, I think we have. Really, seriously, you don't get.
We're
anything.
importing this. No,
you don't. You work really hard all year, filling these mindless voids with your knowledge and your experience, and they're giving you nothing back at the end of the year.
They give me their love. I know they don't. They give no.
Wow. You need to put this in as like a percentage to their final mark. You need to be grading them, and remember 30% of your final grade is going to be based on how much appreciation you show me, because I need to feel valued as a person and as an educator, and that's how you word it. And then you just sit back and you just watch the presents kind of flood in. If you end up with like a double copy of Pandemic, as long as you don't unseal it, you can stick that bad boy on eBay. You can stick that bad boy on eBay and you can get your money back.
Exactly.
That's all
I like this idea. I'm
quite prepared to write a strongly worded letter that you can use as backup, and you can give to the head of the faculty, or when you're. I mean, you could spread this out amongst everybody else. You could make it a movement across the entire kind of educational establishment. If it probably won't work though. I'm just warning you now. If it's
it might be, some sort of ethical violation or something, maybe.
I don't know. Betsy DeVos does a lot of the educational thing. I don't think she's got many ethics.
We don't want to be her. We do not want to be her at all.
I wouldn't mind a bit of her money though. To be perfectly honest, imagine how many board games. There she is.
Now, but that would be dangerous, though, don't you think? I mean, if you had unlimited resources to buy board games, I mean, that seems like that would be problematic. Actually,
no.
You'd buy like a whole house, and it would be nothing but board games. That sounds very cool, doesn't it?
But then you could get other people into board games, and then it takes care of two of my issues: storage space and friends.
Yeah.
There you go. Problem solved.
Yep.
Problem solved. In terms of dragging this screaming by the hair back onto topic again, are you ever in the situation you're talking about, kind of the game side of things and the design of games as well? Is that what you work towards? Are you working towards saying like, okay, well, first of all, let's take some games and let's help you understand how we can use them in history, and then does the design side of things, does that become like a side project? Is that something that you kind of bring in later on?
So in the main class that I teach, which is called History Through Games, so we will do some history background, and then we will play a game, and then we'll kind of talk about how the two link up. Where is the game accurate? Where is it not? Why did the designer make those choices? Yeah. But what the kids are doing throughout the whole semester is they also have a project to come up with a proposal for a history game themselves. So they are coming up with sort of the basic rules and, what the mechanics are to help them fit into a game about whatever they're picking. So the design of the game is something that they're kind of doing over the whole semester. And I've really found that it's a way to get them to think more critically about history and to think more creatively. And it's important that they sort of think about what choices the designers make, and why they make them. And one of the big things that we talk about, and this is why our earlier conversation was so relevant, but one of the big things we talk about is how limited and the complete lack of diversity, really, in who is designing games and publishing games. You know, that it's mostly a white male field, and it's starting to diversify now more. But we talk about how that, you know, that white male sort of view, white male European view, how that limits the topics that they're getting into and how they're seeing things. And so it's just a really, for me, it's just a really cool way for the kids to get into that topic of privilege and to think about race and class and gender, but to do it in sort of more of a fun and engaging way, I guess. So
are the classes
it's been amazing.
Are the classes that you teach, are they predominantly white race, or is it kind of generally a mixture? Does it depend?
Troy is a very diverse school. We have racially diverse. We also have a big international student population.
Okay.
But the classes, interestingly, I mean, so black and white, racially it's diverse, the class is. But gender-wise, it isn't. I always have, 80% males and then 1 or 2 females in the class.
Okay.
And I've been trying to, I've been working really hard to try to broaden that, to bring in more girls. I think that, there's just this image among a lot of women that serious gamers, quote unquote, are men, or maybe that we're just doing video games or first person shooters or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. Yeah.
But, gender wise, I would really love to see a lot more diversity, but, mostly it is mostly men, but diverse racially.
Okay. No, it's just kind of interesting. So do you often have to find that when you're working on the games, you're kind of trying to break away from kind of stereotypes and things like that as well, trying to get them to think differently when they're approaching their own kind of miniature projects, kind of challenge them on their views and what they automatically can do regarding everything from like character creation to who are the perceived kind of good guys and bad guys in a game.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially like the perspective of who they're looking at it from, because we talk a lot about how a lot of games are, you're the business owner, or that you're sort of at this top level when you're doing these things in games. And so having them sort of challenging them to think about what a game would be like from a different perspective. I had one of my students, we just finished a class, and he developed a really kind of a cool game about the Black Plague from the rat's perspective.
Wow.
Which was, and he's, hopefully he's going to continue. I want him to continue with that game, but, so he was kind of, I was kind of pushing him to do that, to kind of change his perspective. I had another one who was doing a train game, and I wanted him to do it from the perspective of the laborer. So he was trying to sort of fit some of those elements in of who was working on the railroads and how they were being treated and that kind of thing too. So, definitely try to challenge their perspectives and challenge, how they're developing their game and how that might look different if they change the point of view that the game is coming from. Absolutely. Yes.
Does it help focus them as well working on a project? Because I'm aware that sometimes classes can be, this is what we need to learn today. And for some people, especially nowadays, I think some people just find that difficult to take in. So have you seen kind of it help with kind of like concentration and focus? And have you even been surprised by, certain kind of students and how they've kind of tackled and approached the games that they've been creating?
Absolutely. because for the project they get to pick their own period of history that they find interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't define that. I let them pick, what they think is interesting, which that can always lead to more engagement. If they want to do it, then maybe they're going to be paying a little bit more attention to it. So yeah, I mean, certainly their engagement is more, but it's also because they're developing something that's out of the box and sort of requires them and forces them to think in a different way about, okay, here we have this historical event. How can we make this into a game element? So it makes them think about things in a different way. And we talk a lot about, how to deal with difficult kind of elements. Do you put slavery in? How do you deal with the Holocaust or whatever. So we do talk a lot about that kind of thing. It does get them more engaged with sort of how they're thinking about topics, I guess. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think especially as generations pass and things like World War II, and in some cases if you even think like things like Vietnam now are kind of moving further and further away into the history.
Oh,
absolutely. You get to the point where, where people who were involved in, World War II, there's very few people left. And we're getting to the point now where even people that were involved in Vietnam, there's not as many people kind of left who are still alive who were involved in that conflict as well. So I think sometimes it's the dangerousness of something that was a history becoming just like a story, if you know what I mean, that people then kind of challenge and say, is that true or is that real? I mean, we're in this, in some ways, in this timeline where people have the right to be Holocaust deniers. They think they can kind of go ahead and challenge that. And it's kind of like, is that why you're kind of approaching that to help, to make people realise, yeah, this is real, this actually happened. If we're going to be talking about this as an element of your game, we've got to kind of tackle it in a kind of like a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, you want them to see history as complicated. You want them to understand that not everything is clean and neat and tidied up. And I think the students tend to think that history is inevitable. Oh, well, this happened because of course it was going to happen. And, Truman dropped the bomb because, well, that was just what was going to happen. And so you try to get them to think about, why things happened and the messy kind of untidy parts of history too. Yeah. But absolutely. I mean, if there's an amnesia about history, then we lose, a lot of ability to make decisions. I think, history, I don't think history foretells the future. I don't think history, shows us what's going to happen. But I do think that it can help us understand that decisions have consequences and that, if things were to go a different way, that might have produced something different, to think about, what happened and why it happened and what were the consequences are really, really important. That's just true of history in general, I think.
Yeah, we always talk about history kind of repeating itself as well.
Yeah.
With regards to the games that are created at the term, are there ones that are like exceptionally good that, when they've come to collect them at the end of term, you have helped them vanish into your own collection? Have you stolen some of your students' projects because they're really, really good, is what I'm trying to say? No, I'm saying that, no, I mean, there must be ones that are really just like, this is a really, really good game that we could maybe even take further. You mentioned that already. Yeah,
we have a game design minor at Troy, which is, they have their major that they do, which is their major field of study. And then their minor is sort of something that they, gather smaller numbers of hours on, but is sort of their secondary course of study. And as a part of that game design minor, they create a game. They create a marketable product. So, we have one student right now who is working on a game about the silk trade in China. and her game is it's amazing. It's really, really good. We took it to Gen Con last year.
Wow.
We play tested it at Gen Con. She had some interest from some publishers.
Really?
She did, and just really proud of her and the work that she's been doing on it. So, and I'm wanting to encourage all of our students to do that. Not all of them. Hers is kind of a heavy Euro sort of game, but we have some who are producing party games or lighter kind of games too. But that's basically what we want for all of our students, is to have them produce a game, that might go on Kickstarter or and actually become a product. And there's always the option too that my company would pick it up, depending on what they want to do with it and whether or not it sort of fits in with what Mockingbird Games is doing. My company, I've always wanted to make sure that we have sort of a social justice kind of emphasis as well. All of our games have some kind of charity that they're associated with.
Yeah.
I'm doing one game for Mockingbird. I'm designing one game called Adopt Me, which is about adopting pets out of shelters. And all of the money from that is going to go to shelters. So, and we're looking for games like, on historical and social justice and environmental kinds of issues too. So, but I mean, yeah, I'm definitely wanting the students to continue with their ideas and to, continue to develop them and get them into a product form, because some of them are just fantastic. I mean, they're really creative and amazing. So, yes.
And you mentioned, is this field trips to Gen Con? Did you actually?
We did.
This is a whole big thing, isn't it? I mean, is there a PAX U kind of field trip? I mean, are you doing other things? Are you going to go to, did you go to Gamma? I mean, I'm sensing kind of like, I know I joked earlier about this is somebody who wanted to bring their hobby into the workspace, but I mean, you're going field trips to Gen Con now, and I mean, this sounds like you've sorted this out very, very well, Scout. Very, very well indeed.
The problem is that it is really expensive, and so I think what we might be able to do this year, we were going to go to Proto Atlanta, which is one of the Protospiels, and I think, but that's like right during final exams, so I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do that. I really do want to continue to take kids to some of these big kind of conventions. Again, the problem being that it's just really expensive, and some of them come from very modest means. Some of them have never been out of the state of Alabama before. So I'm going to keep trying to do that, and we got some support from the university for Gen Con, where they were paying for hotels, for the kids, which was, I mean, that was amazing because it was quite a bit of money. But that was just such a fantastic experience for the girls. It was just amazing. And they were fantastic too. So, but yeah, I would definitely hope to be able to keep doing that. It is expensive.
It's a lot, it's a lot of money. That's why I was wondering if you're mixing kind of like the field trips in to see where else can I go, which would be really really nice. Essen Spiel, I think that's the one you need to aim for. I mean, it's going to be a hard trek.
I don't know. That's kind of small. It's kind of out of the way, and
it's Germany, Scout. We're thinking about doing a little field trip.
That might be a little too big. That just might be.
You can talk about like history at the same time. You can say, "We'll tell you what, we're going to head over to Germany. We're going to do a little bit of the World War II history while we're there, and then we might just happen to go into one of the biggest gaming events of the
accidentally wander in,
fall in. We didn't realize. Oh, is that a ticket? I didn't realize, kind of thing. And then just have a wander, have a kind of a wander around. Do you have any interactivity with? I know you mentioned your own company, Mockingbird Games, which we'll will go on to. But have you had much interactivity from the industry itself? Have you gone and approached kind of various publishing houses to see if they would be kind of interested in kind of getting more involved in what you're doing?
Kind of informally. We're just starting. This is the first full year that we've had the program in. So those are some things that, I really would like to start doing. If we could start some kind of, program like that, especially like for internships, I think would be really good. If some of the publishing companies had internships so that the kids could go out and could learn about, what it takes to be, in the game development and publishing business. I think that would be fantastic. And I've made some connections, but, again, we're sort of in the very beginning stages of that.
Well, I can help with that.
Oh, thank you. That would be so nice.
I've spoken to lots of people. So if you're listening,
you have.
Yeah, of course I have. And if you're listening out there, games people, you hear. I ask very, very little of you, but now I'm asking you, and I shall put some links in the show notes so that you can get in contact and start a dialogue. All you lovely American people can start working together. Let's talk about Mockingbird games.
Yes.
What made you decide to take that step? I guess it was just a natural progression. You brought your hobby into work. You're going to game shows. You might as well make some extra money on the side with your own.
I'm not making any money. I'm making no money.
I know. I know, it's just in case this is being recorded.
Yes.
Anyway.
One of my students was like carrying on about how much money he was going to make, and I'm like, no, we're not like going to become millionaires selling this game. Let's not get carried away. Poor thing. I probably like broke his heart right there. Poor little thing.
Well, they've got to shatter their dreams.
Well, every once in a while. That's what we're here for.
Check. That's what you're here for. I'm here to educate you and shatter your dreams. That's Good night. Yeah. Sorry.
So Mockingbird came out of, I was teaching at the college level, but then I was also teaching Boy Scout merit badges, and they have a merit badge in game design. And so, I had seen how wonderful it was at college. I thought, well, this would be really fun to go and teach younger kids about game design and through the Boy Scouts. My son was in Boy Scouts at the time. And so I went and did this at a winter camp. And I was just completely blown away by, how creative the kids were and, how much they got into doing their little games. And they were so excited to play test them. And they were all kind of gathering around to play test each other's games. So I came away from that experience and was, just so energized by it that, and I remember very distinctly, I told my husband, I'm going to start a company now.
Wow.
And I just want to do this. And of course, I knew, I guess, a little bit about what was involved. I don't think you ever really know what's involved with starting a company and doing something like this until you actually do it. And people, you could read about it and people could tell you about it, but, you don't really realize what's involved until you start to do it. But it has just been a blessing. It's been an amazing experience. I've loved dealing with the kids that I've dealt with and teaching and, kind of showing them what opportunities there are and empowering them. I mean, I think for kids, it's a really empowering experience to sort of see something that they create can become something people buy, there's something in game stores for people to go and buy. And it's neat to see that kind of process and how they experience that and helping them get through that, I guess, is just very cool.
And I don't think they get taught that. I think kids get taught an awful lot about almost like theory stuff. They do the practical stuff, but I don't. I mean, I know you get kind of like business studies, but I think there's a big difference between, learning the jargon and everything like that about, this is what tax is, this is what profit is, this is what, your costs are. kind of thing. And the difference between, well, let's actually kind of start up a business. And I think something like what you're doing, if they're getting the actual, I guess, the working end of the stick to actually see how it works in practice, is a very, very valuable, important life, kind of life lesson. I know a lot of kids had to say, let's spend a couple of hours learning about bills and banking accounts and, how to change a flat tire or a light bulb, and things like that. And I think, sometimes we forget that those are things that you have to learn unless somebody's like willing to take you aside. So the fact that you're doing that and saying, okay, this is actually how a business works, this is how the kind of the production works, and this is how kind of everything like that runs alongside it kind of works. I think that's a really, really important kind of life lesson.
It is, yeah, I agree. And I think too, and what we try to do is, with this idea of empowerment, is to have the kids be involved actively in decisions. It's not like, I'm not making the game. I mean, it's they're involved in what art we're using. They're involved in, what components are in there. Do we have a board, or can we take that out? Or, so they see the financial sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you that having this, but also having a product, they can go to job interviews and college interviews and say, here, look, this is my game that I made, or, so, I mean, I think that's very valuable too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big joke, isn't it? It's like, must have, looking for college graduate, 10 years experience kind of thing. You're just like going, okay. Yeah. But I think there's a thing that we do over here in the UK, which are kind of vocational qualifications, where somebody can actually go into a job and earn a qualification at the same time, which is maybe not like a skill, an actual semi-skilled job, so they're not like going out to be like a joiner or a plumber or an electrician, but if they're going into retail, or if they're going into warehousing, they can get an official certificate that says, look, I'm competent at kind of doing that. And again, it's rewarding.
Oh, that's amazing.
Somebody's kind of, it's just because there are a lot of kids that kind of like, there was a big drive, which is drying up a little bit now, which there used to be a big drive to get everybody into university education. Right. And the problem is when you can repeatedly tell people that the best thing for them to do is to go to university, and then what happens is you miss out with a lot of people who actually were probably suited to kind of working straight out of school, because they're never really going to achieve much academically, but they could be really, really good at doing some things straight out of school and have an excellent career at what they were doing. I think that's, and for them, vocational qualifications are absolutely fantastic, because it still allows them to get a certificate to say they're really, really good, but it also gives them the chance to actually get out there and do the practical stuff and get a job and everything like that, which is kind of pretty cool. You've been on Kickstarter. You took one of the games to Kickstarter, which was it Face to Face?
Yes,
I believe.
Yes.
Was that run as a game? Was that something you did that you evolved the class in, or was that like a separate thing that you did with Aidan?
That was the artwork was done by a young man named Mason Gutensohn, who was a graphic design student at the university. So we had the help of the graphic design students in doing the artwork. It was not a part of the program at Troy. We had done Face to Face partially and poor Aidan got used as a guinea pig. We used that to sort of help us get through the process and help us learn how to get through the process, I guess. Does that make sense? That we wanted a game that we as instructors could learn from, I guess. And, so that this was the game that we started with.
And that went on to be funded. Was that all exciting then? That must have been pretty cool, because I know there's a lot of Kickstarter projects that kind of they start, they stop, they stall, they have to come back kind of multiple times. So was it pretty cool to get yourselves kind of funded and get the game made, and that must have been pretty rewarding?
It was, very stressful, but and I think we learned a lot through that Kickstarter campaign,
Yeah.
about, and I think that if we do it again, we'll have that knowledge behind us, but about the importance of building an audience and building, support for the game. I think one of the things that I found out about myself, I'm not a marketing kind of person. I'm not someone who, you know, go buy this game. This is the greatest game ever. And, I'm not sort of a self promoter. I don't do that naturally, I guess. So it was difficult for me to do that. And it was difficult for me to, get these posts out about the
Yeah.
game and to structure the marketing and the advertising for it beforehand. So, I mean, but it was an amazing learning experience, but it was, also very challenging just because it's something that really does not come naturally to me, at all. But we did learn a lot, and it was a good, experience, I guess. Yeah.
But you're going to do it again, though, aren't you?
Yes. Although,
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to use Kickstarter because of the charity element to it. That these games are going to be funding charity. So and Kickstarter doesn't normally doesn't allow that. So we might be using GoFundMe, to do those kinds of things, which is for us might be a better kind of setup because it's not the all or nothing that Kickstarter is. I think Kickstarter can be very frustrating. If you get $10 within your goal and, don't hit it, then you don't get it. So, but I think we might end up using GoFundMe rather than Kickstarter for some of the games.
Okay. Has overall, I mean, have you thought about kind of developing the course kind of further than expanding it all? I mean, have you? Because it sounds to me like you kind of, this has helped to kind of inspire you to kind of really kind of take the bull by the horns with regards to kind of like the tabletop industry as a whole. I mean, you've started on one side of using games to as kind of teaching aids to producing a game, kind of like yourself. So has that kind of got the neurons firing to say, well, what can I do next? What else can I do kind of in this space?
Absolutely. I love the industry. I love the excitement about it. I love the growth, that I see. The conventions are so much fun. Aiden, my son, loves them, and my mom has gotten really excited. She came to Gen Con one year with us, and she loved it. And and just that there are, that kind of diversity in ages of people who are there, and genders, and that it's just. I'm so excited about the industry. I think that it's neat, and I think it's at kind of a turning point where it's starting to become more self-aware and starting to include more people. And I'm excited about hoping to be part of those efforts too. I think one of the things that I really want to do is to work at being a part of diversifying the industry, specifically, on my end, a lot of it is age wise. But we also, want to do gender and racial diversity too. So, bring in kids who might not have been able to have this experience otherwise. But yeah, and I've gotten really interested in game design myself, and partially because I see gaps in what games are available and what I would like to be able to teach and use in my classes, and noticing that if I want to teach that subject and use a game, I might need to do it myself, and so. Yeah, I mean, it's a neat industry, and a lot of different avenues to pursue too.
Have you been in contact with Elizabeth Hargrave, who did Wingspan, at all?
I have met her several times, and she is just the most amazing, kind, generous person.
Yeah.
And Wingspan is one of my favorite games too. I love that game, but she is just she is really nice. I was at the tabletop game design workshop, I guess, right before BGG.com,
Yeah, yeah.
and in Dallas this past year, and she was there, and it was she's sort of one of the women that I really look up to in this industry, and she's just amazing and kind and approachable and just really, really cool.
I had her on the show when Wingspan was just cresting, when it was just
Yes.
really, people were buzzing, buzzing. And yeah, we had a really good chat. And I would like to say that I spoke to her before the New York Times did. So
Oh, well.
yeah, so there you go. Yeah, so yeah, so
she's so smart and so
yeah,
aware of things and issues, and she's just an amazing, and she's not afraid to sort of be a spokesperson for women and other people of color. That's really impressive, that not only is she a woman who's trailblazing, but she's willing to put herself out there and help others as well. I mean, that's just really special. So
yeah, no,
yeah, I think she's amazing.
Yeah, and we'll see. I'm interested to see what she is gonna do next game wise as well. If it's anything like Wingspan, should be.
Have you seen
good.
Have you seen Mariposas? I haven't really seen anything about. Wasn't she doing a game about butterflies? The Mariposas game. I haven't seen much about that.
Yeah, that came. I think that came out.
Has it? Oh, cool.
I think it did. I think it came out on Kickstarter. I think when you do something like Wingspan, it is kind of like your. I don't know if it's like your Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band kind of album.
Yes.
and it's kind of like you can do whatever you want kind of around it, but that's what everybody's kind of talking about, and kind of well deserved as well. And I know that people were struggling to kind of get hold of the game forever, and it still managed to be one of these games which I find people saying it's really easy to learn, and then find other people saying, well, I just like playing it all the time because it's really easy to kind of just continually play and play and play. So for a lot of people, it's kind of become a staple, which is pretty good. But as I say,
yeah, I think
pretty difficult to find.
I mean, what's neat about that game too is that it's bringing other people into gaming that wouldn't have started with board games before, and I think it's generating press for the board game industry in a way that wasn't there before. So it's kind of opening up these new doors that are really cool, and which should be really instructive and should be a lesson to designers that if you do something different and it's good, then it might have a big impact. That you don't have to stick to doing the exact same game over and over again to be successful. You can do something out of the box and different. I mean, yeah. I guess she was lucky to, find the publisher that she did, and they were supportive of her, and, but maybe, what they did at Stonemaier is going to, help other publishers see that they can take those risks too, maybe. So it's amazing.
Absolutely. If people have listened along today and they would like to keep an eye on you on the internet webs, where do you exist on the internet webs, Scout?
We have a website for for Mockingbird Games, which perennially needs to be updated, but it is there, and it's just www.mockingbird-games.com. I'm on Twitter, and my handle is @ScoutBlum, SCOUTBLUM. I'm on Facebook. I have an Instagram account, but I'm not really very active on Instagram at the moment. But mostly Twitter, and then the Facebook page. Mockingbird has a Facebook page as well, and then the website as well.
Excellent. Well, I will make sure that we put all of the links into the show notes, so we've got notes to show. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
You are very
appreciate your
welcome,
time.
Richard. This has been such a nice, pleasant experience. Thank you.
To try better next time. I thought it was being intimidating. If you want to keep
Scary.
an eye on what we're up to, just go to the internet webs, search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us in all the different worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for the daily races, like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and we've got our blog, and yes, everything.
You are everywhere.
We're kind of spreading, but no touching. But you can also go to Apple Podcasts and you can drop us a subscription or tell other people about us. Yes, that's always nice. If you like what you've listened to today, then consider dropping us a rating or a review. And as we always say, because we've had complaints about the new joke, so we have to go back to the old joke. Don't give us 10 stars because it makes us big-headed. But don't give us 1 star because it makes us cry. Give us something in the middle, like 5, because it's average. And we're just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average is rather wonderful, rather fantastic, Scout Blum. So thank you very much. There's only 2 more things to do.
Okay.
First thing is to remember there were many things. So like Winston Churchill, we are many things, but we are not wizards. Are we wizards, Scout?
No. Never.
Almost, there's a hesitation. I heard a hesitation. And the second thing is
I didn't know if it was like a trick question or something.
It's never a trick question. It's just tricky
right.
answers. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So say goodbye, Scout.
Goodbye, Scout.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, make something awful, and until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.